All right, let's do it. Rational numbers, getting towards the end of this unit. Yesterday we looked at solving some equations, and we're going to be doing two-step equations today. Two-step equations involving negative numbers. So similar to the previous lesson, I'm just going to go over some examples. That's really the best way to go through this. The only thing I'm going to say is when you are solving any equation, the key or the phrase that we like to use is inverse operations, right? We're going to undo the operations that are in place. Well, if there's more than one step involved, you have to decide what's the first thing I'm going to inverse. And the correct answer to that question is not, oh, you just pick something and do it. There's an order in which you must do things. If we were just going to straight up simplify an expression, we would be following the order of operations, which are parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division in any order from left to right. And then lastly, we would do addition and subtraction in any order from left to right. But when you are going through inverse operations, we are going to work in the inverse direction through this typical order of operations. So instead of looking for parentheses first, I'm going to say, is there any addition or subtraction in the problem? And I'm going to undo that first. And then once all addition and subtraction is taken care of, I'm going to go and try to undo any multiplication or division, and so on and so forth. So let's look at our first example today, which let's do negative 3x plus 5 is equal to 2. All right, so if I'm going backwards through my typical order of operations, I'm going to look to undo any addition or subtraction that's present in the problem. And there's addition, so I'm going to inverse that first. The inverse of plus 5 is minus 5, and inverse operations cancel out. Also, as a reminder, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you do it to the other side. So I'm going to be subtracting 5 from the right side of the equation. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. And then what's left on the left side of the equation is negative 3x. So the last thing I'm going to do here is do the inverse of 3 times x, which is to divide by negative 3. Inverse operations simply cancel out one another, and whatever I do to one side of the equation, I do to the other. So since I divided by negative 3 here, I'm going to divide by negative 3 on the right. And I'm on the left side, I have an x left over, and on the right side, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. And that should be my final solution. The best way to test it out is to take that answer and plug it back in your original. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, and negative 3 plus 5 is equal to 2. So I know that this checks out and is my solution. Let's do another one, shall we? Let's do something involving fractions, just for the sake of having you see some fractions. We'll do x divided by 8 minus 1/2 is equal to negative 7 halves. All right, first thing first is, in my normal order of operations, I'd be looking for parentheses, but I'm going to be working backwards. I'm using inverse operations. So is there any addition or subtraction? Yes. What's the inverse of minus 1/2 plus 1/2? Inverse operations cancel out. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So I am going to add 1/2 to this side. Negative 7 halves plus 1/2 is equal to negative 3. You can check that if you want, but 7 halves is the same as 3.5. So I'm basically saying what's negative 3.5 plus positive half. And the remainder that's left over from that is negative 3. On the left-hand side of the equation, there is x divided by 8 remaining. And so my last step here is to do the inverse of divide by 8, which is multiply by 8. Inverse operations cancel out. Do the same thing to the right side, and so my final solution to this problem is x is equal to negative 24. Why is it negative? Because a negative times a positive results in a negative answer, and 8 times 3 is 24, so negative 24. If you want, you can double check it. This would be my negative 24 divided by 8 is negative 3, minus 1/2 is negative 3.5, which is the same as negative 7 over 2. So this totally checks out, makes sense. That is my correct one and only final answer. Just take your time when you're doing these problems, show your steps, and pay attention to your negatives. And I mean, it doesn't take that much when you're done to go back and plug it in and use some mental math or even some scratch work on the side to see if your final answer truly is correct. You can always check and 100% know if you've gotten it correct. So take some time to do that. The only other thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through one word problem. And the word problem that we're going to look at says that you install 500 feet of invisible fencing along the perimeter of a rectangular yard. So let's draw this rectangular yard. What do we know about this? The width of the yard is 100 feet, okay? 100 feet. We know that the length is our unknown, so I'm going to represent that with the letter L. So it says write and solve an equation to find L, the length. And what are we working with here? What is our other known information? Well, the other known information is the perimeter is equal to 500. So let's start with what is perimeter. In a rectangle, perimeter is all of the outside sides added together. So that would be length plus width plus width. And we could simplify that, right? It's 2 lengths plus 2 widths. All right, now let's plug in what we know. We know the perimeter is 500, so that's going to be substituted in for P. And we know that the width is 100 feet, so 2 times 100. And now we can finish this off, right? The first thing I'd probably do is 2 times 100, just to simplify that a bit. So now my equation is 500 is equal to 2 length plus 200. All right, reverse order of operations means I'm going to look for any addition or subtraction. And I'm going to inverse that first and do the same thing to both sides of the equation. And that leaves me with 300 is equal to 2 length. And my last step is to do the inverse here, which is to divide by 2. And divide by 2 on the left. So my remaining is going to be 150. So what does that tell me? That tells me in my rectangle that the length is equal to 150 feet. And we could check it, right? It says the total perimeter should be 500. So 150 plus 150 is 300, plus 100 is 400, plus the other 100 is 500. And so that is most certainly the length of this yard where we are installing invisible fence. I don't have a pet, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's for. Anyways, have a great time doing math. As always, ask questions, take your time, do your best. Woohoo! See ya!